to the magical topic of Webstore Wizardry, which is sponsored by Stash. So let's hear from them.
Look at this amazing video.
I'm just going to hand it over to Justin and Archie. Absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
All right, don't all applaud at once. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks, Jasmine, for making that amazing video. Okay, what's up, guys? Go back one slide. I'm going to start at the beginning. Hello.
Sorry? Testing?
Okay, all right. We're gonna. It's a very auspicious start. This is our dry run. We're coming back in 20 minutes. Okay, does it work? Does the clicker work?
I think we're good.
Okay, we're good. All right, we're good. We're good. We're doing it live. So my name is Justin Kan. Thank you for staying with us to the end of the day. I'm one of the co-founders of Stash, and I'm joined on stage by my colleague, Archie Stonehill. We're here to tell you about the D2C Iceberg, or how you go directly access your customers. I've been a gaming entrepreneur for the last 20 years, started a bunch of different companies. The one that people heard of is Twitch. Archie, you want to give him a few lines about your background?
It's always a tough one after Justin. I was a VC at a company called Makers Fund, investing in games businesses for 5 years before joining Stash as head of product.
All right, next slide. So we're here to tell you about Stash. And what is Stash? Stash is the anti-platform. Our goal is to help developers directly access their customers through a couple different ways. Number one is directly distribute to their customers by building their own custom launchers. The second is to directly monetize their customers with their own web shop. And last is to directly engage their customers and keep them coming back with a player hub that has a bunch of different social features. And I want to tell you a little bit about the history of games and intermediation. So throughout the history of games have always, game companies, game developers, the people making games, have always been intermediated by other people. So back in the 90s, that was things like third-party publishers, but it was also companies like GameStop, before they were a meme stock. You actually went and bought games there. Nobody here remembers that, because they're not as old as I am. And then in the 2000s, games started to be distributed digitally, and you had distribution on companies like Steam, or on consoles like Xbox and PlayStation. And then starting in the late 2000s, the mobile app stores with the Google Play Store and Apple App Store, which you guys are all familiar with. And then in the 2010s, we started to see the first signs of D2C, companies going direct to their customers by distributing themselves. Those are games like Riot and publishers like Riot and Fortnite and Epic. And today that trend has continued, and now we see more and more expansion of D2C. And pretty much everyone is talking about D2C. Everyone is thinking about D2C. I'm sure you've heard about it. I think they were just talking about it here. And so what is that? That's companies building their own web shops to directly monetize their players and sell them stuff directly, and have that commercial relationship with those players directly. And it's building distribution of their games directly with those players. So with that, I'll let Archie take it away.
Cool. So I think, as everyone knows, it's been a tough couple of years after a couple of really good years. So this here just shows what I think everyone here knows, depending on the source. IAP in mobile was down 7 to 10% from 21 to 22, and then probably a bit down last year as well. I think the question is why. To some extent, this was probably a reversion to the mean following an artificial bump during COVID, but I don't think that can be the full answer, because PC console didn't decline as much. So ATT, I think, is the obvious culprit. Everyone knows that that's dramatically affected the industry. But even though ATT has had a huge impact, we want to dig into a little bit of these numbers, because it's notable that they are in-app purchase only specifically. And so we want to talk a bit upfront about the relationship between ATT, declines in the industry, and D2C. So this is a chart of genres, quarter to quarter, year to year, Q3 21 to 22. And as we all know, high LTV genres, the ones with the few players who are massive, massive whales, were the hardest hit for various reasons, harder to target, attribute, etc. Specifically, something like casino, strategy, RPG, those genres. Match is okay, right? Because it has a broader base. But if you look at the conventional narrative, those genres have been wrecked. So we're just going to double click into casino. One of the kind of downsides of consolidation in the industry has been fewer public companies from which to read data, but Playtika is one of them. So Playtika is obviously the biggest casino developer in the world. And these are its financials from 20 to 22. So as you can see, Playtika did not track the industry and did not track its own category. In fact, Playtika grew by 10% from 20 to 22 and was kind of just about flat, a little bit up from 21 to 22. But what that top line number hides is that, in fact, Playtika's mobile revenue has been declining. Its in-app purchase revenue has declined 2%. Over the last year, or over that time frame, but that was offset by an explosion in its direct-to-consumer revenue. So in-app here is through third-party app stores, is what Playtika calls them. That's Google Play, Apple App Store, etc. And then direct-to-consumer for Playtika is almost exclusively web shops. Now, that revenue is not visible. We don't have a good way of tracking it. So some of that 7% decline in IAP presumably is kind of what's happening here, which is a shift from in-app on mobile to web-based monetization through D2C. And remember, it's not just kind of revenue increases, but as we all know, one of the major benefits of D2C is the margin impact, right? You don't have to pay your 30% tax to Apple or Google. So Huge is a good example, a bit behind Playtika in terms of timing, but this is its performance in 2023. Now, they did see a decline in revenue. They saw a 10% decline, 8% decline from Q3 2022 to Q3 2023, and yet they hit record profits. So how is that possible? A couple of reasons, some UA, but even they say the principal reason was their investment in direct-to-consumer. So that chart shows the change in direct-to-consumer revenue as a percentage of Huge's total revenue throughout 2023 up to September. Went from around 3% of revenue to 10% of revenue. And instead of paying 30% for that revenue to Apple or Google, they're paying more like 3 to 4% payment transaction fees. And so this is kind of what we call the D2C iceberg, which is that D2C is pretty invisible, but far more prevalent than I think almost anyone in the industry who's not at one of these companies understands. So this is a select list of just a few companies, by no means exhaustive, and some of the games that they've launched web shops from. As you can see, it's not just casino. It's not even just strategy. It's not just mid-core games. Scopely has web shops for almost all its games, including really successful ones for games like Star Trek and WWE, but also for its solitaire game. Similarly, Krafton and Tencent Activision recently launched the Call of Duty web shop for shooter games on mobile. Zynga has a web shop for its match games. Rovio has a web shop for Angry Birds. So really, if you're big in the space, you've already been doing this for a while.
So what does D2C actually involve? Over the history of games, the game developers have kind of grown in scope in what they are responsible for. It started off in the traditional publishing model where the game developers were just developing the game, and then they'd hand it off to a distributor who was doing all the marketing and distribution, and then those people would send it to retailers who would actually sell the game to people. And that's remember GameStop. And then you have the digital era. The game developers started being responsible for the marketing, figuring out how to do app store marketing, and then the app stores and consoles would actually do the distribution in retail. And finally, today, we're moving into this D2C era where you as the game developer are responsible for pretty much everything if you want to maximize the amount of money that you're making. So that's not just development of the game and the marketing of it, but it's also now figuring out the distribution in retail, which is what Stash is trying to help you do.
Yeah, and so why now? Why is this a trend that's happening now? So there's 4 reasons. The first one is government intervention in regulations in a way that's unprecedented in the digital era. A bunch of you may have been familiar with the Digital Markets Act, which came into effect in Europe on March 7th. That has mandated a bunch of changes in the iOS ecosystem and the Android ecosystem. Similarly, Google lost on 2 counts against Epic in American courts. In December, there's regulation in Europe, there's that regulation in the UK, Japan, South Korea. Pretty much every market globally is doing some degree of digital markets intervention. Cross-platform is another huge reason for direct-to-consumer rises. If you think about cross-platform, it necessitates a direct-to-consumer relationship because the relationship needs to transcend the intermediary platform. So anyone who's doing cross-platform, almost definitionally, is direct-to-consumer. Browser has become a really powerful tool for developers to interact with their gamers, either through HTML5 with WebGL and advancements and other kind of web-based technologies. Even cloud gaming, right, could unlock more D2C. And then finally, just general advancements in technology, whether that's licensed engines, developing code bases that can be deployed on any platform, including HTML5, or the back-end services infrastructure necessary for a first-party identity layer is easier to access. Mobile devices can run better games. All of this stuff is contributing towards more and more direct-to-consumer channels. And it's easy to see why developers want to do this. Now, we're all familiar with the kind of 30%. That's instantly what you think about when you think about the benefits for direct-to-consumer. And so I'm not even going to go into that, but it is probably the biggest benefit. But it's not just that. Direct-to-consumer gives you end-to-end control over the customer journey. It gives you ownership of your own customers. And kind of 4 ways I think about this benefiting developers. The first is that you can actually increase your spend as well. So you have more flexibility and dynamism in a direct-to-consumer relationship than you do in an intermediated relationship. You can increase spend depth through more sophisticated loyalty programs, rewards programs, et cetera. You can even optimize for conversion with more sophisticated discounting strategies, like personalized voucher codes that aren't really available on mobile. Then you can also just improve your game, right? You can improve your experience of your core gameplay. By adding to your social systems, by improving your competitive ecosystem, but just enhancing the kind of richness of your gaming ecosystem. You can also position your company to expand product lines into new revenue streams. You look at someone like Riot, who have done a great job at this with something like Arcane, their kind of anime series, their esports products, merchandise. Direct-to-consumer unlocks all of that. And then finally, and this is the other thing people really think of as first-party data. I think ATT showed everyone how vulnerable you are in an intermediated relationship where you don't have direct access to your customer, where Apple owns your customer and all you have is an anonymized identifier. ATT wouldn't have been pretty impossible if we were operating in a direct-to-consumer industry. And it's not just user acquisition. Having first-party data unlocks something for every part of your organization, whether that's product improvements from better analytics and knowledge about how players are engaging with your app, play testing, et cetera. So the challenge is that D2C is reasonably new in the games industry, at least for developers. So at Stash, we look at other industries that share similarities with games for inspiration on how to do this well. I'll just give 3 examples here. So casino, real money, 1. A lot of casino product differentiation is very hard because they all use the same licensed technology from the same vendors like Playtech, and they don't want to compete on price because that would just be a price war. So they differentiate on customer service, flying people out to Vegas and giving them free drinks and stuff like that. We can do that in games pretty easily as well. Fashion and retail, I think, is a great analog because it had a similar kind of 2-step journey to direct-to-consumer as games are having. At first, fashion and retail was a brick-and-mortar intermediated industry where brick-and-mortar retailers sold on behalf of producers. Then it went to a digitally intermediated ecosystem where you had the likes of Net-a-Porter, Farfetch, other online marketplaces. And then fashion and retail businesses managed to launch their own direct-to-consumer channels. And they did this by maintaining the basic experience of the intermediated distribution channel and launching an enhanced experience that was first-party direct-to-consumer with exclusive offers, a broader catalog, and just a more kind of premium experience. Finally, airlines and hotels, probably my favorite example, because they share similarities with games in that their unit economic cost per unit sold is negligible. So it doesn't really cost anything to have 97% occupancy versus 100% occupancy in a hotel or an airline. So that's why they can give away really generous rewards. Now, we have that even more in games. It doesn't cost you anything to give away a skin. except if you're cannibalizing spend. So we can take a lot of learnings from how they've done loyalty and rewards to induce direct-to-consumer choices. Just a really good case study I'll touch on quickly, I think, is Nike. I think Nike's a phenomenal brand to look at when it comes to doing D2C well. You think about Nike's a shoe company, and yet it's one of the most omnipresent brands. I think Nike Run Club is a perfect embodiment of this. It is a tool, it is an app that's a companion running app. It features all of their sponsored athletes like in your ear. And somehow Nike's managed to go from a shoe company to a brand that its best customers engage with on a daily basis. It's really impressive. And as Justin mentioned, like there are a few case studies of this going well in games. There aren't many, but when it works really well. So you look at Riot and Epic. They share certain features. Both were competing in genres that were fundamentally clones of mods, right? The Battle Royale and the MOBA. And they both beat really, really powerful, like the best game developers in the world, Blizzard, Valve, whoever, and won the category. And they both did it by innovating on business model. Riot was really the first free-to-play Western developer to achieve scale. And Fortnite was really the first free-to-play console game. And they both did it by going direct to consumer, which was harder for discovery. It meant they couldn't use Steam's algo to discover users, but it meant that they built these incredible relationships with their customers. And community management by Riot is like best in class. Look at their esports tournaments. Similarly, Fortnite, is a cultural phenomenon because Epic has this direct relationship with its players. So we'll talk quickly about like how to think about doing D2C. The key thing to remember is that you index on experience over convenience. It will never be as convenient to buy something directly from a brand as it is to buy it from an intermediary. Think about buying something from, I don't know, a fashion brand versus going to a mall, right? It's easier to go to a mall than go to that brand's specific shop. However, you can offer a better experience that gives consumers a reason to go to give up that convenience. I'd remember three things when thinking about how to design this. The first is D2C is for your most engaged users. It's not really a UA channel for marginal users. This is for your core players. Second is you need to tailor D2C to suit what makes your game special, what players like about your game. Normally that's your meta game. You can look at peers in your genre, but really think about what it is about your experience you can enhance. And then finally, like leverage the medium in which you're interacting with your consumers to its maximum potential. You think about like how Disney in reality does Disneyland, right? Like it has created a product to suit physical interaction to match its cinema products. So you can do things on web you can't do on mobile. So think about what the medium unlocks. This is just an example of like what some of this looks like applied. So there's a couple of themes I'll call out here. Across a bunch of these, social is very common, so enabling social activity, particularly social discovery, which is much less solved in games. Enabling players to meet other players, whether that's in an MMORPG, where you're enabling people to find clans or people to do raids with, looking for group, or a competitive game where you can enrich your competitive ecosystem. Exclusives, like a lot of this involves giving exclusive content, which is kind of easy to do and suits everything from hybrid casual to casino. And then finally, like user creativity, like harness your community. I play a lot of Raid Shadow Legends, and the community of Raid's amazing. They've created all these tools that Raid uses that you can only use with Raid's PC launcher, Play and Play. Cool.
All right, so if you remember anything from this talk, then just remember these three things. Number one is you're already late. There's companies like Playtika who are doing $600 million on their D2C web shop, and you can be too. Yeah, but we can help if you want to get set up. The second is D2C is about more than just preserving margin from third parties who may be rent-seeking your property, but it also improves your margins. And lastly, the experience, all about the experience, and that's much more important than the convenience. So you got to go figure out ways to go beyond the gameplay and engage your users in your web store and your website. And we have set up this easy calculator to help you determine whether a web shop's worth it for you. So you can go to stash.gg/fee calculator to understand how much you're paying to your third-party outlets, and we can help you understand what you might save if you directed people to your own web shop. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for attending this talk. If you made it to the end of the day, I applaud you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.